Have you ever wondered if growing too big might cost you something that no one warned you would be so expensive? You keep winning, overcoming, healing, distancing yourself from everything that has hurt you. You become stronger, more aware, more selective. And when you look around, you realize that almost no one has stayed. The world goes on, but you feel that you are no longer part of it as before. And then, silence begins to grow inside you. Rumi wrote, "When the soul matures, it chooses silence as its companion." But what if that silence is a disguised scream? What if this solitude is not just peace, but also a wound? Growing up hurts, but nobody talks about the other side of healing. Spiritual loneliness, the void between who you were and who you are becoming. You begin to realize that some people can't stand your light. They move away, fall silent, disappear, or worse. You distance yourself because you feel that something about them no longer resonates with your soul. This is the scary part of the journey. You grow stronger, but you feel invisible. You expand, but you also isolate yourself. You heal your wounds, but discover others that only silence reveals. And then comes the danger. Confusing growth with abandonment. Confusing solitude with punishment. To think that being alone is a punishment, when in fact it is the womb of your new version. But it's hard to accept that when night falls, and all you hear is the echo of your own thoughts, you begin to doubt your own progress. One wonders if one made the right choices, if you're wondering if you're losing everything, or just everything that wasn't meant to stay. Perhaps you are going through exactly that right now. Perhaps you're feeling strange, disconnected, more introspective, and everyone around you thinks you're too good, too mature, too balanced. But no one knows about the silent longing you feel. The feeling that, in climbing the mountain of consciousness, you left parts of yourself behind. Growing spiritually is beautiful in theory, but in practice it's visceral. It's lonely. It's a path that cuts out the noise and brings you closer to the truth. And the truth sometimes hurts. Rumi said, "You have to keep breaking its heart until it opens." But who will hold your hand while all this is happening? The danger of growing up is thinking you no longer need anyone. It's about closing yourself off so much to avoid getting hurt that you forget the taste of a real hug. It's about learning to survive on your own and thinking that's enough. But I ask you, what if this phase of your life isn't an end, but a journey? What if the loneliness you feel is actually your soul clearing space for deeper connections? If this makes sense to you, he is. Breathe. This video is a reflection of your journey. Comment below, "I feel this silence." Because sometimes just knowing that someone understands, the emptiness doesn't seem so big anymore. In the next section, we'll delve deeper into this silence and discover because growing spiritually also separates you emotionally from almost everything and everyone. Perhaps what you're feeling right now doesn't have a name. It's a strange mix of peace and absence, relief at having left the chaos behind, and longing for no longer knowing where I belong. But I need to tell you something with all the truth that I carry in my soul. What you're feeling is more common than you think. You are not broken. You are in transition. There is a point on the spiritual path where the soul falls silent, not because it is at peace, but because it is waiting for you to truly listen to it. It is at this stage that the outside world begins to seem distant. Trivial conversations lose their meaning. Old ties dissolve without fighting, without drama. They simply disappear. And that's confusing, because no one prepares us for the pain of evolving, to the emptiness of realizing that you no longer belong where you once belonged. And this creates an invisible wound, the pain of being seen as strong, when inside you're begging for connection. You no longer want to go back to being who you were. But you also don't yet know how to be the person who is being born inside you. That's when many give up. Say retrium. They harden, or they pretend to be okay, so as not to scare those who still live at a different pace. But here, in this space, you don't need to pretend. Here, every word is a bridge. Every silence is an unspoken embrace. And every comment you leave is like lighting a light on the path of someone else who is also going through the night. So before we move on, I ask you, comment below, what did this part of the video evoke in you? If any phrase touched you, if any pain was named, if you felt seen, he writes, because when you comment, you show other souls that they are not alone. And if you want this message to reach more people, if you want to help other lost souls find themselves, then click on like. This small gesture is a breath of healing that the algorithm cannot yet explain, but the soul recognizes. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, do it now, not for me, but for you, so that with each video, you receive more than just words, but keys, portals, reflections of what your soul is ready to remember. Let's continue, because now you're going to understand why growing spiritually makes you feel more alone than ever, and why that's the biggest sign your soul is awakening. Have you ever felt that the more you evolve, the fewer people can keep up with you? As if each step you take towards your truth distances you from those who once walked beside you, as if the light that begins to shine within you causes blindness in the eyes of those who always saw you in the dark. Growing spiritually is often like crossing a desert where everything familiar disappears, and what emerges on the horizon is still too unknown to comfort. Perhaps you are exactly at that point right now, a point where your heart remembers who you were, but your soul no longer accepts returning, a place between two worlds, no longer the person who suffered for the same old reasons, but also not yet fully the new version that is being born within you. It is in this space that emptiness appears, a silent emptiness, even elegant, an emptiness that doesn't hurt like before, but disturbs in a subtle, profound, spiritual way. You begin to realize you've become a different person. Your conversations have changed, your desires have changed, even your silence has a different sound now. But the world around you still wants your old self, the one who laughed at anything, who gave without limits, who accepted less than she deserved just to avoid being alone. But now, something inside you refuses. It's over. Your soul has matured. And as Rumi said, when the soul matures, it chooses silence as its companion. But this silence is also frightening, because no one prepares us for the loneliness that comes with awakening. No one tells you that to bloom, you will first need to lose some leaves, that to be free, you will have to accept the weight of walking alone for a while. And this is one of the hardest pains to name, the pain of no longer fitting where home once was, the pain of seeing that certain hugs have become too tight, the pain of realizing that there are people who loved you, but only while you didn't change. And then you start to question yourself. Is there something wrong with me? Was evolving a mistake? Why am I feeling more alone now, just when I'm finally being myself? And this is where the danger lies, the real danger of growing up and being alone. Because you start to doubt your own light. You start to wonder if it's really worth awakening, if all it brings is silence and absence. You even start to miss the suffering that was familiar, just because at least there, you weren't alone. But listen to this carefully. This pain you feel now, it is sacred. It is the birth of your new consciousness. It is the space between the old and the eternal. Don't try to fill it with what you have already overcome. Don't run back to places where your soul no longer breathes. It's difficult, I know. It's uncomfortable, yes, but it's also true. And every truth first passes through the desert before reaching the oasis. Perhaps you've noticed that certain messages of yours are no longer being answered, that people who used to reach out to you all the time now seem distant, that invitations have decreased, that conversations have become shallow, and perhaps this is hurting you silently. Perhaps you've thought you've become boring, cold, indifferent, but no, you've simply begun to listen to yourself. And when you begin to listen to your own soul, the noise of the world ceases to make sense. You're missing something that perhaps never truly existed, a genuine, deep connection that sees beyond the masks, that isn't intimidated by your intensity, that stays even when everything within you changes. And that's why it hurts so much, because most of what we call relationships was, in reality, a survival negotiation, a role-playing game where you needed to hide parts of yourself to be accepted. And now, you no longer accept that. You no longer want to be half of yourself just to be loved. You want to be whole, even if it costs you the company of almost everyone. But look, this is growth, and true growth always comes with ruptures, with distancing, with the loss of what was superficial, to make room for what is essential. Yes, there is a price to pay for awakening, but there is also a miracle in this path, because one day, the emptiness you feel now will be filled with presence. One day, loneliness will become solitude, and in this new space, souls will emerge that vibrate at the same frequency. People who are not frightened by your depth, who don't try to diminish you, who recognize the light you carry, because they too have learned to walk in the dark. Until then, it's normal to feel strange. It's normal to miss what was familiar. It's normal to have days when everything seems too distant, too silent, too empty. But you are exactly where you should be. Silence is not absence, it's preparation. Loneliness is not punishment, it's purification. And this emptiness is the space your soul is clearing to receive what truly matters. You are not alone. It may seem so. It may hurt. But there are thousands of souls going through exactly this right now, feeling that same sense of not belonging, of displacement, of transition. And that's why this video exists, to be a meeting point, so that, even in silence, you feel seen. Remember, your pain has a name, your transformation has meaning, and your loneliness has a purpose. If this is resonating with you right now, comment below. Tell me what this part of the video reminded you of. Tell me if any phrase spoke to your soul, or simply write, "I feel this emptiness." That alone will be enough for another person reading this to know that they are not going through this alone. Perhaps you would like to write, "I am transforming myself, even if it hurts," or "I choose my truth, even if it pushes me away." These phrases, in addition to being internal declarations, help other souls find a reflection, to feel a sense of belonging, to heal themselves as well. Because sometimes, all we need is to see that there's someone on the other side of the screen feeling what we're feeling. Nobody tells you that growing up hurts, that growing spiritually, healing, finding yourself, also comes with losses that nobody sees. Because everyone talks about freeing yourself, about evolving, about finding your own truth, but almost nobody talks about the invisible price of it all. Nobody prepares you for the silence after awakening. Nobody mentions that, when you start to see more deeply, the world around you begins to seem increasingly shallow. And then, what once fulfilled you begins to bore you. The conversations that once distracted you now tire you. The bonds that seemed eternal begin to break without explanation. But why does this happen? Why does healing seem to isolate you? Why is it that the closer you get to who you are, the further you become from those around you? The truth is that there comes a point in the spiritual journey where your energy begins to reject what is no longer compatible with your essence. It's not arrogance, it's not superiority, it's spiritual protection. It's as if your soul is saying, "This no longer serves me." And even if your mind tries to cling to what was comfortable, to what was known, your vibration no longer allows you to pretend. You may even try to fit in again, but everything inside you begins to scream. And this scream sometimes comes in the form of anguish, insomnia, anxiety, or a heavy silence that no one notices, but that you feel as a weight on your chest. And this is exactly where the invisible problem begins. Because on the outside you seem to be doing well. You're calmer, more aware, more introspective. People even compliment you. "Wow, you look so different. You seem more mature. You're at peace, right?" And you smile, agree. But inside, something still bothers you. Because despite all the growth, the clarity, the lucidity, you feel alone. Alone in your gaze, alone in your thoughts, alone in your understanding. And this kind of loneliness is difficult to explain, because it's not the physical absence of people. It's the absence of true connection. You distance yourself from shallow people, but you also lose connections that seemed deep. You lose that friend who was your confidant, but who now no longer understands your choices. You distance yourself from that relationship that once meant everything, but now limits you. You feel like a stranger within your own family. You begin to realize that the bonds that once sustained you were trapped in versions of yourself that no longer exist. And then comes the emptiness, an emptiness that you try to fill with meditation, with reading, with spirituality, with silence. But that insists on returning, because it's not an emptiness of lack, it's an emptiness of transition. You are caught between who you were and who you don't yet know how to be. And as this new identity forms within you, everything that is no longer real falls away. Masks, bonds, beliefs, desires, routines. It's as if the universe is cleansing you to make room for what truly matters. But this process is lonely. It's slow. It's confusing. And that's why many people give up here, because they don't understand that this silent pain isn't a mistake. It's a a sign that the soul is being reformed, that something is aligning inside, something that can no longer be ignored. And you begin to realize that the pain isn't in being alone, but in not being understood, in looking around and finding no one who understands what you feel, in having profound thoughts and having no one to share them with, in feeling too much, and living in a world that feels too little. This is the invisible pain of those who awaken, being seen by everyone, but understood by almost no one, loving silence, but missing being heard, having so much to offer, but no one willing to receive. And then you start to fall silent, to keep your feelings to yourself, because you've realized that if you speak, they'll say you're overthinking, that you need to relax, that you're isolating yourself unnecessarily. But it's not unnecessarily. Your heart knows it's necessary, that you can no longer open yourself up in just any direction, that your soul now needs more subtle, more truthful environments, more aligned with the frequency you carry. And that's why you withdraw, not out of weakness, but out of integrity. This is where many get confused. They think they're regressing, that they're becoming cold, that they're losing faith. But in reality, it's just the soul purifying itself, because every real transformation begins with the collapse of what was illusory. And that's painful. There's no way to lie about it. It hurts to see someone you love drift away. It hurts to realize that what gave you security now imprisons you. It hurts to feel that the world no longer speaks the same language as you. But this pain, however cruel it may seem, is a sign of life. The soul cries out when it is alive, and the silence you feel now is not emptiness. It is a pause, a necessary pause so that you can hear, perhaps for the first time, what has always been within you, your true calling, your true name, your true essence. And if at this moment you feel that nobody understands you, that nobody sees what you are experiencing, I want you to know that this is part of it. This feeling of being out of place, of being different, of carrying a weight that nobody notices, is common in those who are awakening spiritually. It's not madness, it's not an exaggeration, it's real. And that's why it's so important to recognize this process as part of the journey, and not as a detour. You're exactly where you need to be, even if it seems strange, even if it seems lonely, even if it seems dark. This darkness is fertile. It is in it that the soul plants its roots, and soon, you will blossom in a way you can't even imagine. If you've made it this far and felt that this video spoke to parts of you that were silent, I want to ask you something simple, yet profound. Comment below what you're feeling. Tell me if this emptiness I described lives within you too. Write, "I feel this invisible pain," if it's difficult to name. Or, "I'm in transition," even without understanding everything. Perhaps you'd like to write, "My soul is awakening," even if it hurts. Each word you leave here can be an anchor for someone who is also lost. It can be light for someone in the dark. It can be confirmation that even in silence, we are all walking together. This is where most people are mistaken. They think loneliness is a punishment, when in fact it's a calling. A silent, insistent, often uncomfortable but sacred calling. When the soul begins to awaken, it pulls us away from everything that once seemed like home. Not because it wants to punish us, but because it needs to reposition us. Growing spiritually is a process that disorganizes the ego to reorganize the soul. And that's why it hurts. It hurts because the ego hates losing company. It hates letting go of what is known. It feeds on repetition, familiarity, the illusion of control. But the soul doesn't. The soul wants expansion, it wants truth, it wants lightness. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you insist on crawling?" Perhaps you are emotionally dragging yourself through places that no longer belong to you. Perhaps you are trying to force ties that have already been severed by spirituality. Perhaps you are still insisting on keeping a version of yourself alive, just because you are afraid of what you will find when you let that version die. But real growth requires symbolic death. It requires surrender. It requires the courage to detach not only from people, but also from the identities you have built to be accepted. And this is where the spiritual root of your discomfort lies. You are not lost. You are being called inward, to the depths, to the center of yourself. And the ego, which lives on the external, resists with all its might. It screams, it makes excuses, it seeks distractions, because it knows that the deeper you dive inward, the more control it loses. And that is why this process is so lonely, because no one can dive in for you. No one can cross the desert of the soul in your place. This journey is yours, non-transferable, unavoidable. Often, what you are feeling as emptiness is actually a spiritual womb, a space of inner gestation. The soul gathers you into silence not as punishment, but as preparation, because something within you is being born, a new consciousness, a new way of loving, of relating, of being in the world. And the birth of the soul is silent, solitary, dark, but profoundly necessary. But along the way, the ego tries to negotiate. It tries to convince you to go back, to settle for what is shallow, to cling to relationships that no longer have life, to reenact old patterns just because they are more comfortable than the unknown. But you feel it. You know, something inside you has already understood that you can't crawl anymore, that you can't live halfway anymore, that you can't stay silent just to avoid bothering others. This discomfort you're feeling right now isn't weakness. It's a sign of life. It's your soul expanding. It's the light wanting to fill the spaces where there was only shadow before. And that's why the pain comes, because there are parts of you that need to be left behind. There are versions of you that have already fulfilled their purpose and now need to die with dignity, not with guilt, not with attachment, but with honor, to give thanks and let go, to love and let go, to understand and let go. But this requires spiritual maturity. It requires presence. It requires stopping running, stopping escaping, stopping blaming the world, and starting to look inward with truth. Because the silence you are experiencing now has a message. It is trying to tell you something. It is trying to reveal something you don't yet want to see. Perhaps a pain that needs to be acknowledged. Perhaps a choice that needs to be made. Perhaps a courage that needs to be awakened. And when you truly become silent, you begin to hear. You begin to remember. You begin to access a wisdom that has always been there, but that the noise of the world prevented you from hearing. And it is at this point that transformation begins. Not when everything improves on the outside, but when something falls into place on the inside. When the soul breathes, when the heart accepts, when the body relaxes and says, I trust. The problem is that most people don't trust. Most try to speed up the process. They try to name everything, control everything, understand everything. But there are things that can only be understood after they've been experienced. The soul doesn't reveal itself through logic. It reveals itself through feeling, through surrender, through presence. And that's what's being asked of you now, presence. Not answers, not formulas, presence. Because healing doesn't come when you understand everything. Healing comes when you accept what is. Perhaps you're still stuck on the idea that something needs to change outside for you to feel better. But what if everything that needs to happen is happening right now, inside you? What if this phase of your life, however quiet, empty, or confusing it may seem, is exactly what your soul needed to align with its truth? What if you're being protected, and that's why you're so alone? Because sometimes, solitude is the only way the universe finds to take you away from places that hurt you. Sometimes, it needs to isolate you so that you stop distracting yourself, so that you stop justifying yourself, so that you hear what is trying to be born. This is not punishment, it's love. A deep, strange, but real love. A love that sees beyond your fear, that sees who you are becoming, and that knows that if you have the courage to go through this phase, something in you will be reborn with more strength, more clarity, more light. And when you are reborn, everything will make sense. Not because everything has changed on the outside, but because something has aligned on the inside. You will remember that it was necessary to go through this desert, that it was necessary to be alone, that it was necessary to let go, that it was necessary not to understand, and you will be grateful. Not because it was easy, but because it was real. If this text resonated with parts of yourself that were forgotten, comment below. Perhaps you'd like to write, "My soul is being called," or "I am learning to trust in silence." Perhaps all you can say is, "I am crossing," and that's okay. The important thing is to leave this record, for yourself, for others, for the collective soul that is also trying to remember who it is. Your word here can be someone's anchor. Your pain can be the mirror of someone else's healing, and your silence can echo louder than any noise. You've come this far feeling the weight of silence, of distance, of disconnection. You felt the emptiness expanding inside your chest, loneliness taking over a space that was once occupied by voices, hugs, messages, promises, and all of this made you doubt. You questioned if there was something wrong with you, if you were losing people because of your own failings, if this phase of distance was punishment, karma, abandonment. But what nobody tells you is that all real growth requires mourning. Yes, grief. Not just for those who have physically passed away, but for everything you need to leave behind when you decide to truly evolve. There is a silent grief in every step of self-discovery. A grief that has no flowers, no coffins, no formal farewells. But that hurts as if you were burying parts of yourself every day. And you are. You are burying old beliefs, old patterns, emotional ties that no longer sustain you, ways of relating that kept you trapped in a pain that you no longer accept carrying. But no one prepares you for this pain. No one teaches you that growing hurts so much because you'll have to say goodbye to everything that once made sense, but now prevents you from moving forward. Spiritual growth isn't linear, it isn't comfortable, and it's certainly not romantic. It comes with breakups, with sleepless nights, with disconcerting silences, with questions that no one answers. It comes with that kind of sadness that isn't despair, but an inexplicable longing for something you haven't even experienced yet. You're not losing people, you're finding yourself. And this rediscovery of yourself requires space. That's why life is emptying you. That's why certain friendships no longer flow. That's why that relationship that seemed so deep has started to seem small. That's why you're quieter, more introspective, more selective. It's not bitterness, it's clarity. You're seeing better. And when the soul begins to see more clearly, it no longer accepts feeding on crumbs. But that's frightening, because the ego still tries to convince you that you're alone, that you're being abandoned, that something is being forcibly taken away. But the soul whispers another truth. You are being freed. You are emptying yourself of everything that is not you, so that you can finally inhabit your own essence. And that requires courage. Courage to be alone. Courage to go through the pain. Courage not to give up on yourself when everything around you seems to be crumbling. And the pain of growing up, that pain that seems to have no name, is the pain of giving birth to a new version of yourself. It's the silent birth of a more conscious being, more present, more connected to your truth. And like every birth, it comes with contractions, with discomfort, with resistance, because the new needs to tear through the old to be born. And in this process, you will feel lost, fragile, exposed. But it is at this exact point that you are closer to yourself than ever before. You may not realize it, but this pain is sacred. It's not here to destroy you. It's here to reveal what has always been hidden beneath layers of fear, dependence, and the expectations of others. The pain is revealing you, and that's why you cry. That's why you are silent. That's why you feel a kind of grief that no one around you understands, because it's a grief for everything that will never return, for everything that no longer fits, for everything you stopped being to become who you are being born now. Perhaps you're still trying to cling to old bonds, trying to keep people by your side who no longer see you, trying to save connections that sink every time you take a deeper breath. But let me tell you something your soul may already know. What is true remains. What vibrates at the same frequency stays. What recognizes you isn't scared by your evolution. True love doesn't demand that you crawl when you were born to fly. Rumi said, "You were born with wings. Why do you insist on crawling?" Perhaps there is still a part of you that insists on crawling emotionally, diminishing yourself, fitting in, molding yourself to what others expect, just to avoid being alone. But now you are at a point where it is no longer possible to ignore that these wings are growing. And the more you try to repress them, the more pain you feel, because they were not made to fit into emotional cages. They were made for the sky of consciousness, of freedom, of truth. And that's why everything hurts now, because you're being called to fly. But flying requires lightness, and lightness requires detachment. You need to let go. You need to stop trying to keep alive what is already left. You need to accept that there are people who only accompanied you up to a certain point, and that's okay. Be grateful, honor them, love them, but let go. Because holding on to what needs to leave is the silenced way to prevent the new from arriving. This hidden key that almost no one reveals is simple, yet powerful. Every real transformation begins with an end. And every end, however painful, is always the gateway to something more aligned with your soul. You are not being punished. You are being cleansed, purified, prepared, and this pain is the price of freedom, a freedom that begins from within. That doesn't depend on anyone. That doesn't wait for validation. That no longer needs to be understood to exist. If you've read this far and felt something open up inside you, leave a comment below. Write, "I'm giving birth to my new version," if this pain seems familiar to you. Or write, "I am emptying myself in order to rediscover myself." It's clear that this phase makes more sense now. Perhaps you want to say, "I understood the grief of my growth." These words are seeds, and when planted here, they help other souls to flourish along with them. Your comment could be the key someone else needs to navigate their own pain with more courage. Perhaps you've stopped responding to certain messages, and it wasn't out of arrogance nor out of disdain. It was out of silence. Because that type of conversation that once seemed harmless now sounds too empty, too superficial. You read the words, understand the content, but no longer feel the urge to respond. It's as if your soul is protecting you from interactions that drain you, that demand something, that push you to an emotional frequency you no longer belong to. Before, you felt guilty about it. Today, you simply observe, from afar, in silence, with a strange peace that doesn't ask for explanations. You began to choose silence over distraction. It's not that you've distanced yourself from the world because you no longer like people, but because you've learned to like yourself. You've learned to be in your own presence without needing to fill yourself with empty conversations, endless scrolling, external confirmations. You've learned that not every answer needs to be given, that not every presence needs to be maintained, that not every absence needs to be explained. You've understood that there is a type of solitude that heals, a type of silence that liberates. Before, you were surrounded by people, but you felt an unbearable emptiness inside. You even smiled. You even interacted. You even participated in the celebration. But it was as if everything was happening outside of you. Your soul, deep inside, was restless, stifled, ignored. You felt invisible even to those who looked you in the eyes. You felt you gave too much and received crumbs. You felt heard, but not understood. Loved, but not recognized. Surrounded, but profoundly alone. Today, you are alone, but for the first time, at peace. It's strange. It's contradictory. Sometimes it's even frightening. But it's true. Loneliness, which was once your enemy, is now your ally. It teaches you. It reveals you. It protects you. It's no longer about being surrounded by people. It's about being whole within yourself. You see yourself, you hear yourself, you embrace yourself. You've discovered that your own company can be the safest place there is. And not because you gave up on others, but because you finally stopped giving up on yourself. Perhaps you've experienced exactly this. A friendship that suddenly drifted apart. A romantic relationship that seemed promising but gradually dissolved. Invitations that stopped coming. People who started looking at you as if you'd changed too much. And you even tried to go back to how you were before. Tried to fit your new perceptions into the old mold. But it hurt. Pretending hurt more than being alone. And that's when something inside you broke. But this time, this breaking wasn't destruction. It was revelation. You saw the truth. You realized that many of the bonds you called love were merely reflections of your fear of being alone. You chased after them, insisted, explained, molded yourself. Not out of connection, but out of neediness. Not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being rejected, of being abandoned, of not being enough. But spirituality is cruel and generous at the same time. It takes away everything that is illusion so that only what is real remains. And you were left with yourself. Finally, with yourself. And in this new place, something changed. You began to perceive the beauty of pauses, the truth of cycles, the nobility of waiting. You stopped forcing connections, you stopped chasing answers, you stopped asking for love, you began to accept, to allow, to trust. And this internal movement, silent and profound, transformed everything. Now, even alone, you feel you are with those who matter. And those who matter are those who listen to you in silence. Those who don't demand explanations. Those who recognize your light even when you are walking through the shadows. This example may seem symbolic, but perhaps it's your story. Maybe you've felt this in recent months. A feeling of natural detachment. A desire not to expose yourself so much. A wish to withdraw, to protect yourself. to take care of your own inner world. And even without understanding everything, you followed this calling, and you realized that deep down, something sacred was happening. A reconnection, a reunion, a healing that didn't come from outside. It came from silence, from space, from absence. You no longer need to prove yourself. You no longer need to chase after others. You no longer need to explain your changes. Those who vibrate on the same frequency feel it, and those who don't feel it don't need to keep up. It's not about excluding anyone, it's about including yourself. It's about stopping abandoning your own soul to keep others close. It's about accepting that growing hurts, but living without growing hurts even more. You can look back now and see how many versions of yourself had to die so that this version could exist. You can remember each relationship that taught you about boundaries, each separation that showed you about truth, each silence that taught you to listen to what really matters. You can recognize that everything that hurt also revealed something, and that is evolution. That is awakening. If what I said touched a part of you that was still speechless, comment below. Write, "Today I choose peace even if it leaves me alone," or "I am learning to love my own silence." Perhaps the phrase that makes the most sense to you is, "What remains within me is what matters." Whatever you write, leave it recorded here. Your words may be the meeting point for another soul that is also going through a similar experience. It may be a breath of fresh air for someone who needs to understand that it's okay to step away in order to find themselves again. But you still have something that hurts, even after all this awakening, even after learning to enjoy your own company, to honor silence, to let go of what no longer makes sense. There's still a wound that remains there, quiet, subtle, but persistent. A wound that time doesn't heal so easily. A wound that the soul guards carefully, like someone hiding a secret the world wouldn't understand if it saw it. This wound is the pain of realizing you wanted to take everyone with you, but not everyone wants to grow. That not everyone is ready to see what you see now. That there are people you love, and truly love, but who chose to remain on the surface. And that choice hurts. Not because you feel superior, not because you think you know more, but because deep down, all you wanted was to share the light you found. All you wanted was for the people you love to feel what you feel now, to go through it with you, to awaken as well. But they don't come, they don't feel, they don't see. They remain there, trapped in the same pains, the same cycles, the same attachments. And you begin to distance yourself not for lack of love, but for an excess of awareness. Because the truth is, when your soul expands, it can no longer shrink to fit into a space that no longer accommodates its light. You try, you insist, you try to pull, motivate, inspire, but there is a limit. A point where you realize that love cannot replace the free will of the other, and that breaks your heart, silently, because no one sees, no one understands. It's a pain that has no name, a sadness that cannot be explained. You continue loving, continue feeling, continue wishing well, but inside there is grief. Grief for connections that didn't blossom, for bonds that couldn't withstand the depth, for souls that chose not to heed the call. You look at these people and see so much potential, so much beauty, so much unawakened light, and it hurts, because you know that if they would only allow themselves to, they could access something as beautiful as what you have accessed, but they are not ready yet, or they don't want to be. And that's hard to accept, because inside you, there was a hope that by changing, you could change the world around you. But the reality is that not everyone wants to change. Not everyone wants to wake up. And at this moment, you need to make a spiritual choice. The choice not to force, not to carry, not to push anyone onto a path that can only be walked on their own 2 feet. You need to let go. And this letting go is different. It's not anger. It's not indifference, it's mature love. It's accepting that each soul has its own time, that each consciousness has its own rhythm, that you are not here to save anyone, you are here to be light. And being light sometimes is simply illuminating your own path, even if that means walking alone for a while. But even knowing that, it still hurts, because that's the part of the journey no one tells you about. The part where you look back and realize that not everyone who started with you will continue until the end. That not everyone who supported you in the beginning will understand where you've arrived. That not everyone who said they love you will accept the new version you've become. And you fall silent, not for lack of wanting to speak, but because you understand that there's no point in shouting to someone who hasn't yet learned to listen with their heart. So you observe, you love from afar, you give thanks inwardly, and you move on. Sometimes with tears, sometimes with longing, but you move on. Because now you know you can't sacrifice your truth to maintain an illusion. You can no longer ignore your soul to preserve a bond. You can no longer hurt yourself to maintain the idea that love has to be accompanied. Love sometimes is lonely, and even so, it's real. You realize that much of what you called connection was, in fact, a contract of emotional codependency, where you needed to diminish yourself so that the other person wouldn't feel threatened, where you needed to be silent so that the other person wouldn't distance themselves, where you needed to hide your pain so as not to overwhelm them. But now you simply can't do that anymore. Not out of pride, but out of integrity, out of fidelity to your essence, out of respect for your process. And that choice, the choice to keep growing even if it hurts, even if it costs old ties, even if it creates silent estrangements, that choice is the bravest you can make. It's proof that you are prioritizing your soul, your truth, your expansion, even if no one understands, even if no one applauds, even if you have no one to tell. It is at this point that you understand what it truly means to love without possessing, to love without controlling, to love without expecting. You begin to love as nature loves, in silence, in cycles, in surrender. And with this love comes freedom, the freedom to be who you are, the freedom to grow without guilt, to walk away without anger, to move on in peace. And even if it breaks your heart, you know it's necessary. If this silent pain I described resonated with you, comment below. Tell me what's hurting inside. Write it down. I still love him, but I needed to let go. Or I'm learning to accept that not everyone wants to grow up. Perhaps the phrase that best represents you is, my light no longer fits in certain places. Share what's alive inside you right now. Sometimes just putting it into words is enough to start the wound from transforming. Sometimes someone reading will feel they're not alone. And that can be the difference between continuing or giving up. You feel the weight of what you had to leave behind. You feel the echo of what's gone, of what couldn't continue, of what didn't want to grow with you. And this absence throbs silently. Sometimes you wake up and almost forget. Other times, you feel as if your body is present but your soul is still grieving. You walk, you work, you breathe. But there's an underlying longing that no one sees. A longing for everything that, out of self-love, inner truth, spiritual integrity, you had to let go of. But there comes a moment, and perhaps that moment is beginning now, when the pain no longer screams as it once did, when suffering transforms into contemplation, when what broke you begins to become part of something greater. You don't forget, you don't overcome it, you don't erase it, but you begin to accept it. And this acceptance is subtle. It doesn't happen like a snap. It's almost like dew. You only realize it's arrived when everything is already damp with a new presence. You wake up one day and feel that although it still hurts, it no longer paralyzes you. That although there is still longing, you no longer betray yourself trying to recover what is gone. You begin to make peace with the emptiness. Accepting emptiness is accepting the next step. It's understanding that however uncomfortable it may seem, emptiness is also a womb. It's the sacred space where the soul rests before the next birth. It's where roots grow, even if the eyes cannot yet see. It's where silence works in such deep layers that only time will be able to reveal the fruits. And in that time, you learn to breathe differently. You learn not to expect everything to go back to the way it was before. You learn to embrace change without needing to control it. Acceptance is not giving up. It's not passivity. It's not weakness. It's refined strength. It's that wisdom that comes after the storm, when you no longer want to understand everything. You just want to live in peace with what is. Rumi said, "Do not grieve. Everything you lose returns in another form." But the ego doesn't understand this. It only sees what's gone. It only feels what's missing. It only counts what didn't work out. The soul, however, recognizes that everything has its time, and that true loss is never loss. It's space. It's liberation. It's the necessary end for the new to flourish. Sometimes life needs to leave you alone to remind you that what's essential doesn't depend on what's outside, that your worth, your dignity, your light, are not defined by what stayed or what left. You begin to see yourself as a whole person even without applause. You begin to love yourself even without the reflection in someone else's eyes. You begin to belong to yourself, and that changes everything. Because when you belong to yourself, the world ceases to be a threat. Waiting ceases to be pain. Silence becomes a temple, and emptiness transforms into the altar where your new life will be built. The silence of now is the cradle of your next sacred connection. Not a connection made of dependence or neediness, but one that is born from emotional maturity, spiritual integrity, the lucidity of someone who has already crossed the shadow and chosen not to run from themselves anymore. And this connection begins with you, with this new you that emerged from pain, from grief, from silence. This you who is no longer impressed by promises, who no longer bends to be accepted, who doesn't extinguish your light so as not to bother others. This you who knows that being alone can be painful, but that being with someone who doesn't see your soul hurts much more. Acceptance is allowing life to do its work. It's letting go of control. It's opening your heart to what comes without demanding that it be as it was. Acceptance is trusting that what is yours will find you, that what has gone, if it has to return, will return in another time, in another form, with another awareness. And that, if it doesn't return, it's because the universe understood that your soul needed another path. Acceptance is making peace with the sacred that operates in silence, while you live, feel, breathe, learn. And in this space of acceptance, you begin to realize that the pain wasn't punishment. It was the process. That the emptiness wasn't absence. It was preparation. That the silence wasn't punishment. It was the soul's rest before flight. You're not stopping. You're aligning yourself. You're being tuned from within. You're creating space for a life more coherent with who you truly are. And that takes time. It takes patience. It takes presence. But you are closer now. You no longer fight like before. You no longer beg like before. You no longer abandon yourself like before. And that is a sign of healing. It is a sign that what hurt you today teaches you. It is a sign that what left today liberates you. It is a sign that you lost nothing. You only returned to the world what no longer resonated with your soul. And now, with more clarity, more strength, more silence, you begin to make room for everything that is to come. If this text resonated with your current moment, if this silent acceptance is happening within you, even in small gestures, comment below. Write, "I am reconciling with the emptiness," or "The silence is preparing me for something bigger." Perhaps the phrase that best represents you right now is, "I choose to trust in the timing of my soul." Leave these words here. They may be exactly what someone else needs to read to get through another day. And they may be, for you, the starting point of a new chapter, where acceptance ceases to be a renunciation and becomes a liberation. You are not alone. It may seem that way. It may seem that loneliness has taken over you in an overwhelming way. But I need to tell you something now. You are in transition. It's not just a moment of emptiness. It's not a phase of loss. It's a journey. And like any journey, it brings pain, discomfort, uncertainty, but it also brings transformation. You are in the process of reinventing yourself, of aligning with a version of yourself that is still being shaped, forged in the flames of inner growth. And this shift in consciousness is exactly that. The realization that you are not simply going through a crisis, but that you are clearing the space so that only the essential remains. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's confusing. But what is happening now, inside you, is deeper than you can see. What is leaving was no longer necessary. What is going away, what is being dissolved, did not serve the person you are becoming. And however much this loss hurts you, however much you feel the weight of longing and absence, you are being purified. Everything that leaves your life, however difficult it may be, is a liberation. Everything that is lost now is paving the way for you to find yourself. And if you look at the situation in another way, you will see you are being made, not undone. This shift in consciousness doesn't happen all at once. It doesn't happen because you decided you're ready. It happens because the universe forces you to understand that there's no longer room for what doesn't belong to you. It begins to peel away layers one by one until you realize that your soul is vibrating in a purer, truer way, more connected to your purpose. What you thought was your identity begins to dissolve. What you thought was you begins to disappear. And with that comes the feeling of getting lost. But in truth, you're not getting lost, you're finding yourself. And this encounter isn't smooth. It isn't comfortable. It's intensely transformative. You've probably felt this before. The feeling of being in the middle of an emotional storm, where nothing seems to make sense anymore. The people around you may try to comfort you. They may even try to make you believe that everything will pass soon. But you know that this isn't the kind of pain that disappears quickly. This pain is the kind that transforms you. And often, it's in pain that you find true strength. Not the strength that comes from ego, pride, or resistance, but the strength that is born from surrender. The strength that comes when you finally allow yourself to feel everything that's inside you, without fear, without censorship. When you begin to understand that you are not weak for feeling, but strong for allowing yourself to feel. And it is this strength, this surrender, that begins to open the paths to your true transformation. Now, you're clearing space. This is a fundamental shift in how you approach life. You're no longer trying to hold on to everything that was around you, everything that felt familiar, everything that comforted you. You're releasing, you're letting go. Not because you no longer care, but because you've finally understood that you can't carry everything. You can't carry the weight of a life that doesn't resonate with your soul. You can't carry the weight of connections that pull you back. And it's hard, I know, because there's an emotional attachment, there's a history, there's a love behind everything you're letting go of. But you begin to realize that by releasing what binds you, you're making space for what truly matters, for what truly aligns with who you are now. And this release is liberating. It's not a loss, it's a surrender. And when you begin to surrender, when you begin to allow the universe to rearrange your life, you realize something incredible. You are the temple that is being rebuilt. You are not what you lost. You are not what is leaving your life. You are what is being created from all of this. You are the temple being rebuilt with the stones that remained, with the lessons you learned, with the experiences that shaped you. And every part of you, however broken it may seem, has a purpose. Every part of you that is being rebuilt has a place in this new whole. And you are not starting from scratch. You are starting from a much stronger, wiser, and more conscious place than you were before. Every piece of pain, every piece of failure, every piece of loss is being fused into who you are now. And you begin to realize that all of this, every suffering, every tear, every sleepless night, has a much deeper meaning than you imagined. You begin to understand that what seemed like a burden is actually a gift. What seemed like a punishment is actually a catalyst for transformation. And you're no longer wondering why this is happening to you. You're wondering how it will uplift you, how it will expand you, how it will bring you even closer to your true essence. This shift in consciousness is happening within you right now, and it can be painful, yes, but it's also your chance to become something you can't yet imagine. Something more whole, more authentic, more profound. Something that rebuilds itself from the ruins, but emerges much stronger. And it's in this process that you become not only a new person, but a free person. Free from expectations, free from fears, free to be who you truly are, without needing to apologize for it. And perhaps at this moment you still feel lost. Perhaps the path still seems hazy, confusing. But I want you to understand one thing. You are in transition, but you are going to a much stronger place than you have ever been before. You are no longer on the edge of the abyss. You are in the process of becoming the version of yourself that you are already destined to be. And however lonely this journey may seem, however painful the transformation may seem, you are not alone. You never were. If you felt something resonate within you while reading these words, if it spoke to something deep within your soul, comment below. Write, I am the temple that is being rebuilt. Or maybe, I am becoming who I always was. Leave your feelings here, because your feelings may be exactly what another soul needs to read in order to find the courage to follow their own path. The danger of growing up isn't being alone. It's forgetting that solitude is also sacred. It's confusing absence with rejection. It's thinking that, because no one stayed, you're no longer worthwhile. It's letting the silence of the journey steal from you the value of the journey itself. Because yes, there is a void here, and it's real. But within that void pulsates a universe waiting to be born. A universe that carries your new awareness, your new lightness, your new freedom. You've been through so much. You faced not only the outside world, but the inner labyrinths no one saw. You wrestled with memories, expectations, traumas, stories that insisted on defining you. You said goodbye to bonds that were all you knew. You distanced yourself from people who marked your life. And all of this made you believe at some point that you were broken. But no, you were being sculpted. And now, you arrive here, at this exact point in the journey where everything seems too calm, too silent, too simple. And it is in this calmness that beauty resides, because there is no more noise. There is no more rushing. There is no more desperation of someone who needs to be seen, accepted, validated. Now there is presence. Now there is truth. Now there is soul. And when you learn to inhabit this place, even without answers, even without guarantees, even without company, you realize this moment is a portal. Don't fight it. Don't try to escape or rush. Just stay, breathe, feel, listen. There is something sacred being revealed behind your solitude. The soul never awakens in the crowd. It awakens in quiet, in silence, in the space between what you were and what you are becoming. And in that space, however dark it may seem, there is light. Your light, the one you have always carried, but only now have the courage to ignite. This is where everything changes. Not because you found all the answers, but because you stopped running from the questions. You sat with the pain. You looked into the eyes of emptiness. You stopped treating your loneliness as an enemy and began to see it as a teacher. A stern teacher, yes, but fair, because it gave you what no one else could, the truth of who you are when no one is looking. And now, with your eyes turned inward, your ears attentive to the silence, your heart willing to continue even without guarantees, now you know. You know that the journey is not yet over, that the reconstruction is still happening, that the journey has no defined end, but it has purpose. It has meaning. It has soul. You are more whole, more lucid, more genuine. And even if, when you look around, it still seems like nothing has changed, you feel it. Something inside has changed. And that is the most powerful change of all, because it doesn't depend on anyone. It doesn't depend on applause, on answers, on company. It only depends on you, and on your courage to remain. The silence now is not absence. It is preparation. It is the deep breath before the next dive. It is the sacred interval between one version and another. It is where the new begins to form. And this new thing, when it arrives, will not come to fill your loneliness. It will come to overflow your completeness, because now you have already learned. You no longer need anyone to be whole. And that is precisely why, when the other comes, it will be out of affinity, not out of need. It will be by choice, not out of dependence. So, allow yourself to honor this moment. Don't see it as a void, but as a womb, a place where what is essential is being gestated, a place where the soul, silently, prepares its next steps. You are not late. You are not wrong. You are not being forgotten. You are exactly where you should be, paused, present, in spiritual gestation. And if everything you've heard so far resonated within you, if it touched some unnamed spot inside you, comment below. Let what you're feeling overflow into words. Sometimes it's not necessary to write much. Sometimes a single sentence contains all your truth. It could be, "My solitude is sacred," or perhaps, "I am inhabiting my emptiness with respect." If you prefer, write, "I recognize the gateway that this moment represents," or just, "I am silent, but awake." Whatever your choice, leave a fragment of your soul here. Your words may be a mirror for someone, a comfort for those who are also traversing the invisible, and a reminder for yourself that even in silence you were never truly alone. If you've stayed with me this far, know this: it already says a lot about your soul. Not everyone stays until the end. Not everyone can endure this silence. Not everyone faces this journey, but you stayed. And for that, I honor you, because it shows that you are ready to continue this inner path, this journey that has no map, but has meaning. If you felt truth in the words, if at any point your soul was touched, subscribe to the channel here, not just to receive new videos, but to continue walking with me down this road where each video is a key that opens inner doors, doors you may not even have known existed, but which now are about to open. And if something within you is beginning to blossom, leave a like. This isn't about numbers. It's about energy. About saying, with a simple gesture, I felt something here. And now look at the video that's appearing on the screen. Yes, the one that's gently calling to you. It's the continuation of this path. The next key, the next door. Watch, feel, allow. Because the journey doesn't end here. It's only just beginning.